So we'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Water Policy Committee for July 2025 to order. And we'll go ahead and start with approval of the minutes. Councilmember Bergan, any changes?
No, they're good with me.
All right, Councilmember Medina.
All good, thank you.
All right, then those will stand approved as presented. And then we have our consent items. Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions about the consent items?
I'm good.
Okay, and Councilmember Bergan?
Just a brief maybe update on the water supply, just because it seems like it's been pretty dry lately, and I always forget which reservoir seems to be the lowest.
We're, yeah, it's been dry. We're hanging around at 82%
Okay,
total storage, flat line there. That's probably be our peak. We normally peak this time of year, and I think we probably hit it.
okay.
Yeah, we're experiencing a senior river call right now, which is called out most of our water rights in the upper South Platte. I think they're probably still yielding over in the Colorado, Arkansas, Rocky Forge stuff, but yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And what's our usual peak? Or what is that? It's in the 90s, right?
It's really hard to get much higher than 90 because you get reservoirs all over the place. And so for everything to be full all at the same moment in time is difficult. In the packet, in my report, there's one spot that shows the last 5 years of what the peaks were. And 82 is better than we've had in a couple of years. It's a little less than we've had in a couple of years too, but it's not a bad spot to be. 90 would be better. Given all things considered, what we thought we were facing this year, that's not a bad spot to have ended up. We just hopefully we can hang on as long as possible, but maybe get some rain today.
It looks like it might.
All right, thank you for that. So I wanted to ask Sarah, I saw all land acquisitions are on hold for Wild Horse. And we're still kind of trying to work with the BLM on permitting. Can you just give a little bit more of an update on the record around kind of permitting timeline and challenges and how that's affecting the land acquisitions?
Sure. So permitting, we're still on schedule so far based on the conversation we had last time, and are still hoping for a notice of intent process to get started early next year. There's a lot of questions and conversations about the latest regulation changes. And so we are, working with our attorney and working to understand if BLM will be changing any of their approaches based on that. So that's still in discussion, but we'll definitely let you know next time if there are anything major that comes out of that. And if anything, what we're hoping is that results in a little bit quicker process, but we're not holding our breath just yet for that, but we're working on it. And then as far as land acquisitions, so the proposed action site, we only have a handful, I think it's 5 small parcels that we were negotiating with, that we would need to take the next step in terms of condemnation, and are pausing on that. That's not an urgent thing in terms of where we are in the permitting process and what have you, but certainly wanted to make sure that the selected project was in fact the current proposed action or current Wild Horse site before heading into that territory. So that's where we're at. And then we're also, again, just working with the BLM in terms of understanding the kind of selected project before we move further in terms of any other property acquisition. So that's the reason.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. That is helpful.
Chair, can I ask?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Sarah, so makes sense. You're not going to acquire land and then find out we can't do Wild Horse. we have to have an alternative site. So did you just, where are we with the alternative site analysis?
Yep, so we are still in the process of putting together basically the full application. What happens next is we provide all the information about all the different alternative locations, and then the BLM will go through a process where they analyze the different impacts associated with each of those alternatives. And that is actually the EIS process that starts next year. So we are currently moving forward with the proposed action that we've got, and we're working closely with them to understand impacts as they analyze them, basically. So there's they have what we're trying to understand more about, and what they're trying to understand more about is we have wetlands evaluations going on and natural resources evaluations going on for each of the alternatives. We've got you know, kind of property socioeconomic analyses going on between all the alternatives. We've got tribal, there's a lot of tribes that are interested in this project. I think there's 7 or it might be 9 different tribes along the west who are interested in the project, who are actually coming out onto the site the next number of months. And so
You said,
I'm sorry.
when you were saying how many tribes, I think we didn't have you for audio.
Oh, sorry. So there's between 7 and 9 tribes who are interested in being included in kind of the on-site evaluations. So those processes are happening over the next several months, and they are actually going to be looking at all of the locations as well. So this is really kind of the core of the NEPA process in terms of understanding what the evaluation contains for a bunch of those different resources. And so right now we're in the providing data about all of those things process.
Is there any way to get the governor to like put some urgency on this?
We've talked about that a little bit. We don't, maybe at one point, we don't think right now is probably the right time to do that. The federal government is kind of messing around with the NEPA regulations right now.
And I guess he's not popular with the administration. So.
So we've got that dynamic. The BLM recently has made comments. They're trying to adjust to some of the changes that are being made at the federal level. So we're trying to sort through all of that right now.
It's such a shame.
Well intended. We think there might be some benefits on the back end, but sorting through it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, and that is, so one of the things that is happening right now is, like, as an example, the EPA is it's important for them to understand the need for this reservoir, all of the different components of it, just as an example for one agency, because when the official process starts, we very much want them in a space of, we understand it, we're supportive, we know that there are going to be impacts, you know what I mean? So that there's a lot of education happening on who are potentially the folks who could throw up the biggest roadblocks that could be really long-term roadblocks. So to Marshall's point, there are some benefits about what is happening right now that hopefully get us to a positive decision, and then not a lot of issues after that. So it's definitely a long game, and this has been an interesting exercise in patience for somebody who's not naturally very patient, but I do think it's important, the things that are going on right now, for sure. And we're trying to find any area we can to expedite.
And just a point, once we get through all of this and we're approved, and can we let them know how much this has cost us with all this back and forth and changes? And like, I think I don't know if it's the federal government, the state government, all the agencies, they need to know how much this has cost in millions of dollars acquiring land that now we don't need, and the whole, it's frustrating.
It is very frustrating, and that's a good idea. We will track all those costs. We do have periodic check-ins, and provide information similar to that on projects that include delays and costs, and or we go in and say, hey, we're very frustrated.
Because in the end, like this reservoir, what was the original cost that we thought?
Original cost estimate was somewhere around 300 million,
And now,
probably closer to 1 billion.
exactly. Could build a couple of them.
Yeah, all those costs weren't necessarily driven by regulatory complications, but some were, and we can break out those pieces.
But even time delays
Time delays are a
are
huge,
huge costs and construction costs. And I mean, all that factors in.
for sure.
So yeah, we could have built 3, I think.
Mhm. Yeah,
Sorry, Chair.
You're all good. I totally agree and understand. And yeah, maybe 2 when we consider all the changes that we were bound to deal with. We probably still could have built 2 for the cost impacts of delays and changes to regulations and changes to siting and all of those things. So thank you, Sarah, for your leadership and attention to all of these different details and processes that are part of making this happen as we're going through the NEPA, which we know is really like the tough part, right? That's where all the problems tend to arise. So thank you for helping to manage all of that and keeping us updated. And there are more details for those who are interested in the backup, just on other aspects of the process. So, yeah, thank you for the update. And we will move on to the Horizon Uptown reimbursement agreement with Jenny Nguyen.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jenny Nguyen, and I'm a utility review engineer in the Planning and Engineering Division. I'm here to present the Horizon Uptown reimbursement agreement. Let me share my screen. All right. The proposed reimbursement agreement is between the City of Aurora and HU Land LLC for work that was completed in 2020, and its warranty period for final acceptance passed on February 28th, 2022. So that means this is all public infrastructure that we already own at this point. The reimbursement agreement includes 4 total parts that are all located along Piccadilly near 6th Ave and Stephen D. Hogan. So here is Piccadilly north-south, and then 6th and Stephen D. Hogan. The developer built the orange storm line from their site to the north here down to Coal Creek for their own drainage needs, but Aurora Water asked them to construct 2 additional culverts and extend 2 additional water line lowerings to create space for a future parallel storm line to help direct regional flows. All 4 pieces of this reimbursement agreement were constructed to plan for future drainage needs as determined by the drainage report for this region. First, there's a 30-inch steel waterline lowering in 6th Ave and a 16-inch reuse waterline lowering and relocation that were extended for ease of the future parallel large stormline installation. A box culvert was added under Stephen D. Hogan, and another box culvert was added under Piccadilly in the pink down here, just to convey flows from the future region. All 4 of these improvements were made under the direction of Aurora Water Engineering to account for future development in the area and were not necessary for the Horizon Uptown site. These improvements are considered regional and are therefore eligible for reimbursement. We would like to pay HU Land LLC for their work as one lump sum, which totals to $268,945. This amount was determined by actual costs and receipts from HU Land LLC. Since all improvements are already complete and their warranty periods have ended, Aurora Water would like to pay HU Land LLC upon finalization of this agreement. The cost was budgeted in the 2022 stormwater funds and has been earmarked for this project since. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Bergan, any questions?
Nope.
Okay, and does
Councilmember
water
Medina?
policy, oh, sorry.
No, I'm good.
All right. And then just, for anyone who may be watching that's not familiar, it's relatively common for us to have these types of reimbursement agreements when we ask for any developer to construct improvements above and beyond what's necessary for their own to service their own developments. So I do not have any questions. Jenny, thank you for the presentation. And are there any objections to moving this forward? Okay, we will go ahead and move this forward then. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item is the Urban Watershed Study Intergovernmental Agreement with Matthew Ashley.
Or Rich Bidmar.
Hi there, it's Rich Bidmar. Matt is elsewhere today, so I'm going to present this item. This is a proposed agreement between Aurora and the USGS for joint funding for a water quality study on the South Platte from Chatfield down to just upstream of the Prairie Waters Project at 120th near the Henderson Gauge, and then also from Cherry Creek Reservoir down to the confluence as well. This study is a what they call a Lagrangian study, Lagrange, I should say, Lagrangian study. He was a French mathematician who developed a method for tracking molecules using fluid dynamics. So it's very, very heady mathematics stuff, but they're looking for sources of both point source and non-point source constituents, so nitrates and phosphorus that enter the water. So the USGS did a study back in 2020. Aurora was not engaged in that, where they did this study, established a baseline. And the proposed study now is basically another look to compare what the water quality situation is in the river compared to the baseline. They've asked us to joint fund in part $15,000 a year for the next 3 years, so $45,000 total. And we will get a report and some presentations from them, and we will be able to kind of use that information for looking at water quality, particularly above prairie waters. Denver Water is also helping fund the study in part. It will take 3 years to do. They're going to look at different flow regimes, high flow, low flow, average flow, so different times of the year. We're interested in, like I said, in the results, given Prairie Waters is downstream and as part of our forest water protection. Then USGS is going to provide all the staffing, and Denver Water and Aurora are going to help with some of the funding.
And just to
All right,
clarify,
excellent. Thank you for, oh, sorry, go ahead, Marshall.
Rich, I was just going to clarify, Denver Water's agreement is a separate IGA.
That's correct.
Which is why it's not part of the commentary. So this focuses on our IGA with them, but there is a separate IGA, the Denver Water.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for joining us today, Rich. Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions?
At this time, thanks.
All right, Councilmember Bergan?
Yes, just once they have the results, what happens then?
So that's a very good question. I think that this project's being done in conjunction with the South Platte Urban Watershed Partner Group, which is a group of federal agencies, NGOs. There's 100 different organizations associated with it. What we would utilize the study for is to understand the water quality within the river vis-a-vis our treatment and how we handle that. What also may come out of this is if they identify some of these sources for non-point source. We know the point sources, those are wastewater discharges, those are fairly much more easy. But there may be some water quality projects that may come out where we could work with some of the partners potentially to help improve water quality. So it may be trying to capture some of those nitrates or phosphoruses through wetlands or other means, stormwater projects. That might be what comes out from the non-point source side.
Which is all good to find out what's going into the the watershed, but I always think, okay, here comes a new regulation and a new cost.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Who covers the cost?
Yeah, and that's the tough part because that's by, regulations are EPA and then enforced by CDPHE, which are, I believe, part of the consortium. But so it's a good question, what may come out of that. We're more looking at it from the water quality
Right.
side and what we can do to mitigate. Yeah.
The other complication, though, exactly to your point, is that Metro Water Recovery is being hit with tightening regulations on the nutrient loading, et cetera, temperature requirements in the South Platte River. So we probably won't have, or I would not anticipate we'll have direct costs as much, but we anticipate definitely dealing with indirect costs as they get burdened on Metro Water Recovery, which we are the second largest member entity of, and so those costs are just distributed to the members. So we will likely see, and we've seen cost impacts already with Metro Water Recovery, dealing with some of the nutrient and temperature challenges in the South Platte River. So we'll continue to see those.
Thanks.
I believe the question for council is for the Water Policy Committee is when we would like to move this forward to study session.
All right, Councilmember Bergan, you're good. Councilmember Medina.
Yes.
All right, we will go ahead and move that forward to study session. Thank you so much.
Great.
Right, and our next item is the Strontia Springs Deep Sediment Removal Intergovernmental Agreement Amendment with Matthew Alsop.
Hi, I'm Matthew Alsop. I'm the Source of Supply Superintendent. Yes, as stated, this is an amendment for the deep sediment removal project in the existing IGA with Denver Water through the Foothills project. During the deep sediment removal project design, a more efficient alternative was identified, and it's called facilitated flushing. The method uses the Dam's Emergency Reservoir Draining System, also known as the ERDS. And it uses a dredge pump with water jetting agitator, and it moves sediment downstream. And this is offering a potential cost savings and some environmental benefits than the mechanical remover that was originally designed. The challenge with facilitated flushing, it does require an Army Corps of Engineers permit, which will take an uncertain amount of time and possibly no approval. They can deny the approval, possibly. So the goal is Denver Water is going to pursue the permit. And they will, if approved, the plan is to use this technology by 2026. If it's denied, we would go back to the original mechanical dredging from the original design of the project, and that would be scheduled 2029 to 2030 would be the goal to do that, and that has to do with coordination with treatment plant shutdowns from Denver and Aurora. So the Aurora's share of the deep sediment roof project was $1.3 million. If we do the facilitated flushing alternative, it's estimated about $330,000. So roughly $1 million in savings if we can go through this. Possibly the Army Corps can actually add they're going to add some BMPs in the river, so we're not sending sediment all the way to Chatfield. So there'll be some costs. These are just real rough estimates. Essentially, what we're asking is just an extension of this IGA so we can pursue the facilitated flushing. Yeah. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Councilmember Bergan, any questions?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, Councilmember Medina.
Nope.
All right, and so then if we are denied, we would just return back to the other method that was originally proposed.
Correct.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Are we all good to move this forward?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, thank you so much. And our next item is growth with intention with Alex Davis and I think also Marshall Brown.
This is part 2.
Are you going to do this tonight too?
I've got a little piece of this in there tonight, not all of it, but a little. And this is part 2. You remember we came to, what was that, 2 months ago, 3 months ago? Of the part 1. So this is the part 2, which is going to lead to some questions. We're going to have to make some adjustments coming out of this one. So this is kind of the meatier half of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to be quiet. Alex, run with it. I'm going to be quiet as much as I can. We'll see how that
Are we taking bets?
So, and this is meteor and it's a big deal. So we're looking forward to your input and your suggestions on how to move this forward. So I'll jump in, growth with intention. As you know, I always love talking to water policy committee because you guys understand what we do and how we do it, and you're engaged in all the things that we do. Other council members, much less so. So part of this will be helping them understand. And so part of what I'm going to say is stuff you guys already know well, but I'm going to say it anyway. So in our planning for the future growth, we do the integrated water master plan, and the second one was finished last year, and really created this map, which is also a map that is being used for the Wild Horse project. The red are areas that we do not expect to serve. So it's because those are large areas, and A at the top is actually Denver County land. B and C are Rangeview and or Prosper. I kind of forget which one is which. D and C is also is the other one. One's Rangeview, one's Prosper.
Rangeview is D and C.
Okay, thank you.
Sky Ranch and Prosper are B and C.
Okay, thank you. And recall that Rangeview, Sky Ranch, and Prosper are mostly being built on non-tributary groundwater. And then E is the Lowry Ranch, which the city has been in the past very active in helping ensure that the state land board keep that undeveloped.
Yes.
We do not want Lowry Ranch to become another source of water requests. So the red was not included in any way in the IWMP because it's all land that belongs to someone else that somebody else is responsible for. The green is future growth that's identified and planned and programmed, and we expect to be able to meet all of the needs in the green.
And that's within city limits, already annexed into the city.
Thank you. Yes. And then the yellow is the planning area boundary, which is not programmed into our actual needs yet.
I voted no on it, just FYI.
And also not yet annexed.
And
So
not yet
none of the yellow is yet.
Yeah, I voted
annexed
no on
into
the
the city.
boundary
Right.
a long time ago.
Good for you. So you're already there where we need to be. And so the IWMP calculated 40% population growth over the next 20 years. It's a lot of people, a lot of industry. With and when they looked at what our water needs were going to be, they included our very aggressive conservation ongoing. They included the non-functional turf ban, which, as you all know and supported, is a big deal in reducing the needs for the future. And they projected an increased need of about, in the next 35 years, 23 to 25,000 acre feet of water. The water numbers that you see here, like the 93,000 for 2020, which is about the same as it is today, includes system losses. So you probably are very familiar with the distribution numbers, which are more 55 to 60,000 acre feet. Mm-hmm. In order to get that water coming out of the treatment plant, we need about 93, 95,000 acre feet. because of the system losses. It also includes contractual commitments like WISE, which doesn't go through our treatment plants, as well as Roxborough and other entities that we are contractually committed to providing water for. So that's why that 93,000 is bigger than the distribution number.
WISE does go through the treatment plants.
Oh, right, it does.
But it's still on top of this 55 to 60.
Yes, it's not counted as the water distributed, but thank you for that distinction. It gets treated, but it's not part of that 55,000. And then I also wanted to point out on this, the stream losses. So reservoir evaporation, we have 12 reservoirs that we use. Some of them we own in full and others we use through partnerships. And so evaporation is a big deal, and stream losses as water, even as it's running down after we sort of account for it being our right, and then we run it downstream, those losses are increasing fairly dramatically due to climatic warming. So you can see 2012, it was approximately 10% losses. Now it's almost 20% losses.
Which is a big deal, right? You're talking, say 100,000 acre feet and you have a 10% additional loss. And this is what I'll talk about a little bit tonight. That's 10,000 acre feet of water. That's a huge volume of water. So when we get questions about why do existing customers have to conserve, or why does tier 4 exist in the rates? That's why we're not burdening ratepayers with growth, but the existing water supply is shrinking because of a few different things. The warming that Alex talked about, the Colorado River negotiations, right, are a big highlight of shrinking supplies. And so that's why conservation is so important for existing customers. And how we've structured our tiered rate structure is essentially, in some ways you could interpret that tier 3 and 4 are where the financial burden of that water loss is, because we're having to go acquire additional supplies or build additional resiliency in our system, primarily for discretionary uses. And so that's why tier 3 and 4 are higher rates than tier 1 and 2, is that's essentially where we've put that burden, the financial burden. So we'll probably get some, depending on who comes tonight, we may get some of those questions.
And this slide really explains in more detail exactly what Marshall was just saying, which it shows you the blue is the dark blue is our current system supplies. The speckled is prairie water supplies, current. And you can see that they decline as we go forward. Those existing supplies decline due to climate change, due to, right now we have a great lease with Pueblo Board of Waterworks that we get every year. That lease expires and they're probably not going to renew it in 2035. Maybe they do, but you can see that's quite a significant jump down as well. And the black line is demand, and it also decreases a little bit as we do get to end some of our extraterritorial leases in the future, particularly to XL is a big one. But the demand, of course, just keeps going up. And the speckled orange are our future prairie water supplies. I think you guys have heard a lot, like the horizontal well and all the great things that we're doing at the North Campus to increase the water supply to prairie waters is shown in the speckled orange. And then the other orange are all of our existing projects that we have planned. This goes out to 2050. And what we're concerned about is after 2050, coming in later. So we have, in terms of future water supply opportunities, the mountain supply is Upper South Platte, Arkansas, and Colorado River Basin. We do have the Eagle River project in the Colorado River Basin. But if you think Wild Horse is hard, just wait. The Eagle River project will be 100 times harder. And so we're not really banking on that at the moment, because it's going to, with the Colorado River issues that are going on, a large supply project from the Upper Colorado will be very, very difficult. The Arkansas, we've done a great job in the Arkansas with our farm purchase down there. We have, as you all may remember, about 10,000 acre feet that we can develop in the Arkansas according to the agreements that we've signed. And that farm gives us about 7,500 acre feet of that, 3 years out of 10. And we're working on a few other contracts. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll have filled out that entire 10,000 acre feet. And that's already in play. Upper South Platte, there's really nothing left to develop up there. We think we've taken advantage of every opportunity that has been available. And so we're not seeing any future opportunities in the mountain supply. Colorado, Arkansas, Upper South Platte. We've done a lot of great things. We have a few more spaces that we can operate, but largely done up there. So the remaining opportunities are the projects that are in the IWMP and the Lower South Platte. So the Lower South Platte, as you are aware, we've done a lot of work to figure out what more water supplies we can get from the Lower South Platte. That water itself is much more expensive. And so one of the themes of this is expense and complexity and actually feasibility. In the Lower South Platte Master Plan, which we did a couple years ago, I don't think you all have seen it recently, but you did see it some time ago. We looked at all the different opportunities in the South Platte. And we created 5 portfolios. And portfolio E is the most complicated, the most complex, and the most inclusive. So every idea we could think of that had some basis in reality is in portfolio E. Portfolio E is designed to increase our yield, to double our yield from the Lower South Platte. And it's aspirational, right? We're not sure that we can get all of it done because there are other entities that are also looking at the Lower South Platte. All the other communities on the Front Range in the South Platte Basin, they all are looking at the Lower South Platte. That's where the remaining agriculture is. That's where the remaining water right projects are going to be. So, we are very aggressive. Our team is very effective, but we're not the only ones in the market. Portfolio E is going to be, if we acquire all the water that we're looking to acquire, $680 million, the capital cost to bring so every water right that we change requires significant capital. We have to put in various head gates, we have to do measurement structures, we have to move the water up to our system. This particular portfolio E includes some pipelines, some pump stations. We're looking at one, and these capital costs, of course, are very high level. And that's why it's such a big range, right? $1 to $2.7 billion. But again, it's about saying, the estimated cost is pretty significant to get to portfolio E. What the IWMP found, based on all the information and analysis they did, was that we need to accomplish portfolio E before 2055. And part of that is due to the competition, right? If we don't do it, somebody else is going to step in and do it. So that's a couple of $2 billion by 2055. And based on that current planning boundary, based on what's in that yellow, we would need an additional 10,000 acre feet, best case scenario, which includes the Eagle River project, or 40,000 acre feet, with that yellow in there, on top of portfolio E. This slide, again, looks at numbers. This is the capital improvement plan that came out of the IWMP. So this is what we're planning on doing over the next 20 years. And just you can see that it's pretty significant. This is not just the water resources side, though we're the green and we do have a large chunk of that, but it's all the work that has to be done for source of supply, for treatment and distribution, to keep the system running. This is all stuff that needs to be done. And 20 years, it's looking at an estimated $3.5 billion. This is just to show you that the prices of water, which you already well know, are going up. And it has done nothing but go up. There's sometimes we get a great deal in there, but generally the cost of water per acre foot goes up in price. And that's certainly not going to change as prices get, as supply shrinks and
Jumped
demand
up in
grows.
2021.
Yeah, 2021, we got a great deal. I'd have to ask Dawn so we have London Mine is in there, Tetzel Ditch is in there, and the Tetzel Ditch was remarkably cheap because it's way downstream. So we haven't quite figured out how we're going to get that Tetzel Ditch water upstream because it's miles downstream. But it was a super price and we got most of the ditch. So it was a great opportunity. So we grabbed it. And then CNA is in there for last year, of course. So we've got some big purchases. This too, you three are very well aware of all the innovative work that this department has done in order to meet the future, right? We do amazing things. Prairie Waters, of course, London Mine, the turf ordinance, the farm down in the Arkansas. We're looking at direct potable reuse. That's being worked on very hard right now. The large water user guide, which I think came through your study this Monday. So that's a big deal. Looking at fee structures and allocations and how much people get to use. So these are all things that are really helpful in addressing the problems that we have and helping us meet what we've said we can meet, which is the green, right? The stuff that's annexed, that's in the city, we can do that. And that's really exciting that we can do that because that's a big deal. Demand reduction is helpful, but it's not going to get us there. If we were to go back, which I don't think is very popular at the moment, to try to get rid of all existing turf.
No.
Right. We don't, if sometime in the future, but it would only get us 8,000 acres.
And you do want our money anyway.
Right. So that's, that could help, but it wouldn't get us there.
Isn't that, I mean, that's true. Like if at some point, if people weren't using hardly any water, you also get less revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it becomes more pronounced in systems that are not growing. So if we're not adding new demands to the system as we reduce demands within the system, then it becomes more pronounced even. So for us, because we're still seeing a significant growth component, the rates aren't really having to go up as we do water conservation because the additional demands are hitting the system. So we stayed flat overall water use for a number of years. Now we are trending a little bit up because of the additional demands that are hitting the system, but the per person use, the per capita water use per day is trending down a little bit. So it's working out okay for us. But if we didn't have those additional demands hitting the system and we trimmed use out, we would, like you said, lose revenue. 70 to 80% of our costs are fixed. So only 20 to 30% are variable. So we would save a little bit, but most of our costs would stay the same and then rates would have to go up. So much easier to do water conservation programs when you're adding demands and growing. So now is the right time to do that.
And we have, outside of just our own challenges, there's a lot of stuff going on in the water world in Colorado that adds to the challenges and the risks. So we've talked about climate variability and climate change, but warming is a big deal. Our modeling is showing additional reductions in stream flow. 25 to 30% is what's been talked about in the Colorado River for about 25 years. And we're seeing that happen in the Colorado River, which is why the negotiations there are so intense. Looking at 14 to 27% in the South Platte, 20 to 32% in the Arkansas. So that's a decreased supply.
That's a big deal. That's our existing supply
Right.
that is shrinking.
Yeah.
That's not good for any of us.
No.
And we spoke earlier about water quality and the water quality study. This will have huge impacts on water quality as well.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes everything more complicated
And more expensive.
and more expensive.
That's a good point. It's the supplies shrink as the water itself shrinks. The salts and the solids, whatever's
it's
in the
more-
water stays the same, so it's concentrated. And then our treatment costs go up. So it has direct cost implications and it has indirect cost implications.
When I was growing up, the little saying was the solution to pollution is dilution. And that works if you have water to dilute it with, right? No
But I
longer.
remember in the late 70s, I just remember a professor telling us that ice age was coming. Do you think one's coming?
Right?
Who knows?
We want that. That
Well,
would-
not ice age, but
We don't want the temperatures maybe, but the water that
Right.
comes, that would be good.
Oh, that'd be excellent. Bring him back. There's the Northern Water Alliance is interesting. So, the downstream of the South Platte is up north, right? So it's always, and the folks in the north are saying, hey, this water belongs, we should get to use this water. That's part of the competition that's going on that's going to make it harder is intentional activities by other entities to keep Aurora out, South Metro out. They look at us and they say, this isn't your area.
Yeah.
Water law doesn't work that way, but they're trying. The Shoshone in-stream flow proposal, we are deeply engaged in that. So that is a proposal of using the XL water rights on the Colorado River to change them to an in-stream flow on the Colorado River. We have, some of you may remember the Busca-Ivanhoe agreement that we made where we agreed to support the senior XL Shoshone right to be changed to an in-stream flow. But we did not agree that that could happen in a manner that injured our Colorado River water rights. Right now, the Colorado River District is proposing a methodology that would absolutely injure our Colorado River rights.
Proposing to include the junior water rights with the senior, which we didn't agree to support. And they're proposing to expand the senior by excluding a lot of historical use records that don't fit there.
who's proposing this?
The Colorado River Water Conservancy District.
Oh,
Yeah, they're based in Glenwood Springs. They're a consortium that, well, consortium probably isn't the right word, but they're an entity that was created, back in
32.
Okay, I was gonna say 48, a long time ago.
Yeah.
To protect, I guess, interests of the Colorado River, primarily on the west slope. And so that they're difficult to deal with.
Their board members are all representatives of each of the counties on the west slope that take water from the Colorado River. Since all the water on the west slope makes it to the Colorado River, that's basically the entire west slope, except the lower southwest corner. They're not involved in the Colorado River District. But they're a pretty powerful entity and they're pushing hard, and it's going to be, you'll be hearing more about it because we'll be having a hearing in front of the Water Conservation Board in September on this issue. And then it will go to water court. So that's a threat to our Colorado River rights. We talked about the IGAs, we talked about Eagle River Project. And so we've talked about everything here. So the world is getting more complicated in the water space. We've basically covered a lot of this slide as well. We've got continued growth. There's going to be limited supply. The warming is going to be a huge problem. Increased conservation is significantly important. More trade-offs, creative supplies. So the DPR and WSAs are water sharing agreements with agriculture is what that means. And so looking at how we work more with agricultural communities. And let me tell you, Aurora works very closely with the agricultural community right now, which is great. And we have wonderful people like Dawn who have great relationships in that community. And we're very interested in working closely with them. So, regional initiatives and partnerships are more and more important and becoming more difficult. So you may recall SPROG, the South Platte Regional Working Group, the South Platte Regional Opportunities Working Group.
Lord.
And
Yeah.
and that was it was Denver, Aurora, Northern, Lower Arkansas Water Conservancy District folks, South Metro, and it was an attempt to really look at the region and work together to answer some of these future questions as a group with all the sort of major entities together. And that was blown up by Northern about 6 months ago. We hadn't made a lot of progress, but it was at least a forum where the groups were trying to work together and becoming strained. It's no longer in place. So relationships are becoming strained, and they're becoming harder as people. Exactly. So
Like the Hunger Games.
I love the Hunger Games. So what we're looking for is how do we shrink the yellow? How do we say no perhaps to extraterritorial agreements? How do we say no to new annexations? How do we reduce expectations from other people that we are going to provide them water in the future when we know we can't do that?
Yeah, so none of these would be without some level of controversy.
Yeah.
Some would be a little easier for us to draw a line in the sand, like extraterritorial agreements. There's no, we get a lot of those requests. We have a couple of requests pending right now, actually. But we could establish policies that just says, look, we don't have the water to be able to support demands outside of city limits. One of our struggles will likely be in the future as those systems, like Alex mentioned earlier, that are dependent upon groundwater, as the groundwater becomes more and more depleted, they're not going to have anywhere to go except for probably to Aurora to say, hey, can you help bail us out? So one of the things that's pending right now is a subdivision called Thunderbird Estates.
Yeah.
That they've been on groundwater forever. They're outside of the city of Aurora. I think they're in the yellow, so they're in a potential future planning area space. They're not really interested in annexing in, but they do want water service. So they're saying, can we work an agreement together to get water service from Aurora? We have another request pending right now in Elbert County that they're saying, hey, you guys, one of the recent things we did extraterritorial wise did get down into Elbert County, and they're saying, oh, we're just south of them. Can we hook up for an emergency connection? So they're starting in a little different place where they're saying, we plan on continuing to use our wells, just our wells periodically go down for maintenance or other things. And when that happens, we'd like to pay you to receive water from you. And we're saying, well, those temporary shutdowns will eventually become permanent. So if we hook up even for an emergency supply, it will likely turn into a permanent supply.
So know how temporary agreements work.
That's how we ended up with the D-word we already have. So we could probably set some policy relatively easily with the extraterritorial emergency connections and just say, we're not going to provide those services outside existing city limits. It gets a little more gray when some of those are in our planning area boundary, and there's the possibility that they could annex. So the other thing we're looking at, all annexations, as you guys know better than anybody, are not created equal.
Right.
So we're looking at those yellow spaces. We're going through a process right now where we will likely bring forward a recommendation through CWAC and then back to water policy to potentially trim about 20 square miles out of that yellow space. We're working with ODA planning, et cetera, right now to understand everything that's pending, the discussions, any expectations that might be out there already to try to stay away from some of those areas with what we trim out. But we think we would like to trim some of that space out of the planning area boundary. The pink, we may need to set some policy associated with those pink areas that just makes it really clear that there is no water supply set aside for those pink areas. We have we have two of those pink areas that are in discussion with the city right now about coming into the city through other annexations. So there's even some of the spaces that we thought were pretty clearly not going to receive or obligate Aurora water. There's one up in A and there's one down in C that are pending right now in discussion for potentially coming into the city.
But that are not in our boundary?
They're in the planning area boundary. They're outside of city limits. They're in, one of them is in unannexed Arapahoe County. The other one's in the city and county of Denver. Because A is city and county of Denver, but they're talking about some weird land swap, something or other. So we are concerned that if we continue to try to grow into our planning area boundary, we won't eventually have the water supply to do that, to meet those demands.
So Chair Coombs, Sir Coombs. You're muted.
Yes, sorry, I was having difficulty unmuting. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just so your proposal, you said might look at shrinking the planning area that has not yet annexed in. So are you looking at what is the greatest impact from whether it be residential versus commercial, what kind of commercial?
We're trying to weigh all of those things.
Because obviously infrastructure has to go further out. I know they pay for it, but that doesn't matter if we don't have water.
Right.
And yeah, and the
It's-
impact to current.
Yeah, previously in discussions about annexation, we had talked about the huge costs but we've set up a fee structure so that growth would pay for the infrastructure, pay for the water supply. The latest iteration of the integrated water master plan is what caused us some pause where we said, we don't think we can actually develop the water supply regardless of how much money is brought to the equation. And so we need to trim back to get to a space we think we can create projects. Now, it will still be very expensive, but we need to get to something we think is.
And then how much in our non-annex land, don't we have like something like 40% undeveloped land or 50%? I can't remember what
Yes.
the number is
So
anymore.
that's shown in the hatched gray,
Yeah, partially developed.
partially developed within the city limits. So what we're saying is we have either enough supply already, or we can acquire and develop supply for what's in the city limits already. So
But also just in terms of future developments wanting to come in, there's plenty of
there is,
different land
yes,
that can be like, everybody's like, oh, housing shortage. We've got land, we don't need to go out to Kansas.
correct. Yes, plenty of
And so
undeveloped.
that's, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
That's kind of my question is, so we're saying we're gonna trim out or try to trim out within the yellow. Is there any consideration in any of the green, which is future growth area within city limits? Like, are there any areas where there's not really a clear development plan or other things in place that we could also look at and say, you know what? If like, yes, this is within city limits, but we're not going to develop it. We're going to ask that it be dedicated to open space or other uses that won't require irrigation and other water uses?
That's a great question. And yes, we are looking at those types of options too. So likely what we'll bring back will be something that says no extraterritorial agreements, no emergency connections outside of city limits. A recommendation to trim, we think probably around 20 square miles out of the yellow of the planning area boundary. And we'll have a future, we need to do a little more. And so we're going to go back and look a little more carefully at the green and even and some of the remaining yellow. And well, two parts. So yes, to your question, not in this phase, but there will be a kind of a footnote that says we'll be coming back with additional recommendations that are going to take us a little longer to probably sort through.
But you have to be really careful because property rights, so.
Entitlement,
So,
property rights.
Councilmember Coombs mentioned making it open space. We can't just do that. Like, so I think the better course is you're not getting water. So if you're going to want to come in or expand,
Yep.
And there's no water, you're not going to build. Like if you don't have water, you don't build. So I think that's more the direction is based on water supply, not on taking away someone's property rights.
Correct. And even there, you have to be careful because we may, with some of them, even more than others, existing annexation agreements, et cetera, we may have already made commitments to provide the
Oh,
water.
right. But
So we've got to look through. So that's not going to be in phase one of our
Right.
recommendation. We've got to look a lot more carefully.
but why only 20% of the non-annex? It's right now, it's just in the boundary. No one's annexed in. Couldn't we reduce that footprint?
20%, it would be about 50%. we think,
Okay.
Right up front.
20 square miles.
Oh, 20 square
There's-
miles.
So there's about 40 square miles in the yellow, roughly. And we're looking at coming forward with a recommendation to remove half of that or
Okay.
20 square miles. Some of it is in some process already. So that's what we're trying to sort through. To make sure we don't inadvertently affect something that commitments or obligations may have, or expectations have been created for. Now, after we trim the initial 50% of the yellow out, that will also be part of that additional evaluation where we're looking at the green and that other yellow and saying, what else might we be able to do to go a little further? Because it doesn't quite close the gap, but it's a big first step.
Yeah.
So the other thing you'll probably see a recommendation on is the pink, where we don't know exactly what that policy would look like, but where we say we probably need to create a policy similar to what you were describing, where we say we do not have water supply to meet any demands in any of these pink areas.
Right.
So there's a few things that we're refining, working on to bring back because of this delta. Growth isn't necessarily causing the delta, not in its entirety, but by tightening growth up, we minimize our future water supply problems and allow ourselves to focus a little more on if our water supply shrinks by, you saw numbers like 30% in there. We need to make sure we can meet the needs of our existing population.
And even if you implemented some of these policies on the pink, no, you don't get water. The yellow, we reduce the square area, whatever. It doesn't mean that 50 years down the road or 20 years down the road, if some miracle happened, and we just have tons of water,
Yep.
you can always change that.
Yes, and that's a really good observation. So, and we didn't get into this too much, but Colorado is in a really weird place in all the climate models. So a lot of those climate models will have great agreement with certain geographic areas saying it's going to get warmer and you're going to see less water. Colorado kind of has a big question mark drawn over it. It's in the exact, apparently wrong place for all those climate models. They can't agree. So some of them project less water, some project more water, some project flat. So it's kind of a question mark area. Nobody knows for sure what's going to happen anywhere, but especially in Colorado, the level of certainty is huge. So we think we will see less, well, we know we will see less snow and more rain. But whether the overall precipitation goes down, up, or remains the same is uncertain in those models.
And I think the important thing, the distinction there is the precipitation, the volume of water that accrues to the state of Colorado may stay relatively the same, but with warming, the evaporation, the stream losses, those will continue to get larger. So the overall water supply will still shrink. And it's kind of, is it 14% or is it 27%?
Right,
That's the
because
question.
And that's why
evaporation goes up.
reservoirs are so important to
That's
have.
one reason,
Right.
yeah. And one reason the design of the reservoir is so important, right? Which one of the things we tweaked with Wild Horse that wasn't necessarily driven by the regulatory process has resulted in a deeper, less geographically expansive footprint, which helps minimize evaporation. But yeah, regardless of whether there's the same more or less water that comes to Colorado, we know more will be in rain than historically has been in snow. And we know that the supply still shrinks because of evaporation and the big one is evapotranspiration. So all the plants get a lot thirstier when temperatures increase 1 degree. It's kind of crazy how much more water the plants consume with relatively what would seem like small increases in temperature. So,
Question I have is just on that development, you said that Thunderbird or whatever, they're currently using well water, right? But what if that dries up or we say we're gonna annex that, what happens? I mean, where is their next option?
and that's
Just curious.
that's a great question, and it's a really difficult thing to deal with, right? So we do anticipate as we progress in the future and groundwater supplies become more and more diminished, we'll have increased pressure to help serve water to some of those areas.
Won't they go on WISE?
They wouldn't necessarily go on WISE. They're not able to do that. WISE, in fact, originally we talked about WISE could be expandable. We're not thinking it's a good idea to expand WISE anymore because we don't have water supply to share with others, even in those time periods. WISE originally was contemplated when we had times of surplus, we could share it, and times of drought, which was only 3 and 10, we were saying, no, we need to keep it for ourselves. Now the mentality is shifting more to how do we figure out how to maximize every single drop and store it, whether it's in surface water reservoirs. We're still looking at aquifer storage potentially. How do we maximize that for our own drought protections, contingencies, shrinking water supplies, et cetera? So to answer your question, kind of the thinking is we need to start communicating limitations to everybody. The policy implication would be if we shrink our planning area boundary, we do some of these other things, and a Thunderbird Estates, their wells go dry, they could come approach us, but the trade-off, what we would have to then bring to council is we could take on this demand, but we'll have to set aside this other area where we cannot meet those demands in the future. So it would be kind of a trade-off scenario.
Can we build more water tanks?
We could. Water tanks themselves we use for managing our distribution system. So you have to, it's treated water that you see in the water tanks. So you have to keep the water moving through those.
Oh,
If the water's not moving, you have to treat it all over again. So tanks have limitations in our distribution system. If you make them too big, and by the way, we're talking to Buckley right now, they want to build a water tank and they're like, it's not going to provide the benefits you think you need to get out of this, which is supply resiliency. We build supply resiliency more in the raw water system. And then we treat it and put it in the distribution system. So tanks have limitations. We could add a little bit more storage, but we have to be conscious of the water always moving through there. Or you end up with the first thing you end up with are disinfection byproducts, which are when the chlorine and chloramine break down, they're not quite as healthy for people. And so we have to very carefully manage.
So who's getting the water from the water tank on Smoky Hill?
That's going to Wise.
Yeah. And the one on Chambers is not ours, right? Chambers and Smoky Hill or whatever that, Buckley,
Buckley,
whose is that?
that's part of our distribution.
It is ours?
Those
Oh.
are ours. Yeah, yeah. I was pausing because there is one way up north, but it's on about the Chambers alignment. ECCV has built some water tanks up there in some of the county islands up there. So those are, but the Buckley Chambers ones are some of our above ground tanks. We have underground tanks also just right across the street. So we do have more than what people realize out there, but you have to balance how much you put out there.
One of the interesting aspects that's going on with the non-tributary wells is counties like Adams County was looking at. So right now, the allocation for a non-tributary well is based on a 100-year life. And Adams County wanted to change that to a 300-year life, which would decrease, by 2/3 the number of houses that can be put on any of those wells. So Rangeview, for example, was lobbying against that. And what's really interesting to me when people think, 100 years, the Colorado Groundwater Management Act, which started that 100-year allocation, was passed in 1965. So we're already 60 years into that 100-year period of the wells that were drilled. And so 100 years goes by like remarkably fast. And maybe, so it's just interesting to think about. The counties are, at least a couple of the counties are very much aware that this is going to be a problem. These non-tributary wells are going to be a big problem. And they're, looking to push developments like Rangeview to develop a lot less on that supply.
One other thing, and this gets to your question a little bit, Ruben. If we don't allow extraterritorial agreements right now, the developments are still showing up. So we're still seeing more Thunderbird estates come. They're building on groundwater. They're listening to people like Rangeview. And eventually they're going to have a water supply problem also. So the other policy question that we're looking at, but we're not sure how this looks. Nobody in Colorado has done anything like this, but could we look at going outside of our planning area boundary, outside of our city limits, and trying to create limitations there to avoid people showing up
Right.
later and needing to connect to our system. So we're looking at that. That's probably more of a phase 3. So we've got kind of phase 1. We're going to bring recommendations here soon. We've got kind of a phase 2 that'll be probably in a few more years that we'll bring back to tighten a few more things up. And then there's these other things. We're not sure what we can do in those spaces, but we're looking at that too.
Do you do presentations like to the HBA or, just to let them know, like, this is coming and this is going to, like,
So
you
this
guys
is
are wanting to build, but
the only place we've taken this so far is CWAC and water policy. We think what we need to do is come up with some recommendations for council before we get out there to the HBAs and the ADCs and all of those worlds, because we don't want to put you guys in a position to immediately start getting lobbied from people, say in the yellow, saying, I was counting, even though I haven't done anything, I was counting on Aurora's system. So trying to be a little sensitive with some of that on what we get out there, how soon. want to make sure you all are aware of what the challenges are, what we're looking at. So the other question we had today was, do you have any additional thoughts? Anything else we think, or you think we might want to consider or be looking at now, having an idea what our challenge is?
I think we've thrown them
Yeah,
out there.
and so I think that's where I want to go back to what I was saying. I was not suggesting let's just take away people's land and dedicate it for open space, but rather having some discussions that are more hybrid discussions of, right, like we will not have water to residentially develop with even backyard turf the whole space that you're talking about developing here. Can we have a conversation about this is how much we really have water for, and the rest of this we'll ask you to dedicate to non-irrigated uses. So whether that's open space or other uses, just kind of asking folks to carve out some areas that will be designated as non-irrigable in order to ensure that they, and then we agree, will provide water for X amount of the land if you agree to some restrictions on other portions of your land related to water use.
Yes, thank you for that. On that note, another question we're going to have to deal with. Artificial turf is going to become a big question again too. It's already come up. We've started discussions internally with city staff. So I should say CWAC, water policy are the only two public places we've talked about this. We are having discussions internally with the other city departments. The sports park has come up, for example, and eventually they'd like to expand the sports park. There are advantages and disadvantages to artificial turf, but one of the huge advantages is a much, much lower water footprint. And so with these open space type areas, or even parks or pocket parks, what do we start doing with, right now we allow functional turf. So sports fields can be natural turf. Do we tighten that up and say sports fields now have to either use a Tahoma 31 bluegrass or Bermuda grass or an artificial turf? You can't use, do we ban essentially Kentucky bluegrass for any purposes? So there's some questions there. So there's some other things we can definitely tighten up that will probably be a good idea, but all of those things have ripples, right? Through policy and growth and just.
Were you copied on my email that about
Yes.
in my community, the Metro District that converted to non-turf took out the beautiful grass looks horrendous. The weeds, the thistles, there's thistles this high all over, like just massive amounts.
And that's another thing we probably need to figure out. Shawnee's right here. She can help with this. And I don't know, we probably caused some of this ourselves.
I mean, why did they put in the Bermuda grass?
Well,
Instead,
they
like,
could
that
have,
would've been-
they could have put buffalo grass, which you put in your
Yeah.
email. They could have put Tahoma 31. Part of what I think is happening right now, and we're seeing this a little bit with our WaterWise landscape rebates too. People think that, and we've even said, hey, if you go to a WaterWise landscape, your maintenance goes down. What people have seemed to have heard is if you go to a WaterWise landscape, you don't have to maintain.
Oh, yeah, that's
Right.
what, that's
A very different thing. So your maintenance does go down, but it also changes, right? You don't have to go mow anymore, which is a lot of time and effort, but you do have to go do weed control. So whether you put a Tahoma 31 or a Bermuda or a buffalo grass or some of those native grasses, there's still maintenance required. It just looks very different.
But like, there's so many of those thistles, like, so what did they put in that was contaminated or whatever that caused that. It's like crazy.
Yep. So there can be a couple of different things that can happen. The seed mixes can get contaminated, or just with everything else blowing around, we have high wind. Those weeds, especially those thistles, flower and they send flyers out and they go everywhere. And so if you're not doing the maintenance to keep them out of the natural grasses, then they can become very problematic. They're even worse sometimes. If you want to see the worst area in the city, it's in Ward 6. It's right over here. So if you drive, do you know where the new Vibe car wash is? So there's a car wash they built just on the north side of the Southlands Mall.
Oh,
So
yeah.
on the back side of Nordstrom Rack.
Yeah.
And there's a street and a car wash. They put low water use landscape in on the curbside on the north or on the south side of that street. If you want to really get frustrated.
I think I had the complaint last year from the residents that
It's-
live up.
The
Right.
thistles there
Yeah.
are almost as tall as the trees.
And I
it's
see, I actually
all
walked it.
Thistle. So yeah, so we've got to figure out how to educate people on the maintenance required with these lower water use landscapes, because the thistles are invasive and they'll take over one of those.
So the buffalo or the other Bermuda don't maybe minimize that at all? No?
No, well, they can. Here's the trade-off there. So, and we've got to adjust this to, I've been having conversations with Brian Green, but it's a community expectation that we go in and mow the edges of those native grass areas. So the native grasses themselves, once they're established and healthy, do pretty well minimizing the invasive weeds. But as soon as you compromise the health of the native grasses, the weeds will take over. So the quickest, easiest way to compromise the health of a native grass is to mow it. And then it compromises the root structure, it compromises everything, and then the weeds come in. And so we go do a lot of that. We mow the corridors because people don't feel safe. So
Yeah,
one
there's
advantage.
snakes coming out at you.
Yep. One of the advantages of a Bermuda grass or a buffalo grass is they don't grow as high as those other native grasses. So you don't end up having to mow them as often. So from that perspective, they can control the weeds a little bit better because you don't compromise the health of the grasses as much.
Sorry, Chair, I went off on a tangent.
Well, and just to add slightly to that tangent, one thing people don't realize with the thistles, they'll mow them down, but if you leave them, they will often bud and seed anyway. So you have to clean them up. You can't just mow them down and leave them there and say, oh, they'll just compost themselves, and they will continue to seed. And so they will continue to spread, even if you cut them all down, if you leave them out there. People don't understand.
Yeah, so we've got some, I think we're needing to educate and adjust. The community is going to have to adjust to lower water uses, right? I guess kind of American society is used to a bluegrass dynamic where you plant Kentucky bluegrass, you water it a ton, and you put a bunch of pesticides and herbicides on it to keep the weeds and insects out of it. And it's not good for the environment. There's a lot of research out there on that now, but it is easier, even though it's not necessarily less maintenance. It's a different kind of maintenance that's easy because you can get on your mower and the mower does most of the work, and you can squirt liquids out there and that does most of the work, instead of going out and kind of hand pulling to get the roots and everything out. You can still use the herbicides, can control those, but they'll come back. So you can either do hand maintenance or you can do herbicides. You still have that choice, but people think you plant native grasses, you don't have to do any of that. And that's part of the problem. So we've got to fix that. We've got a few things.
Or at least, try to educate people as much as possible, because people sometimes just don't listen.
They're just mad. Because they also know that the district got a rebate. And they're like, well, our fees didn't go down. And now we got this ugly mess.
Curly documents are a big problem. So we can, I don't know if that might be helpful at some point to try to come out and do, we tried it with the area near the Central Rec Center, the Hutchinson Channel, because they were very frustrated with some similar things. Some of the people were receptive. They said, oh, we get it, we understand. But others were just insistent. You shall mow. You can't let these grasses get tall. And then they got off on the buffalo grass is the solution. Just put that in there and that'll solve all the problems. And trying to talk to them about, no, you'll still have the weed problem. You'll still have to do maintenance. And they don't want to. So that whole group actually shifted back eventually to just put the Kentucky bluegrass back in and just water it. And it's like, so it's a challenge. I think we can get there, but it's going to take some time. So,
But that is a tangent.
thanks for that discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was good. The presentation.
And we'll be back.
Yeah, thank you all for bringing that. And, I know we'll continue to have these discussions because they are very needed. I think we already asked our questions. Are there
Right.
any last questions before we wrap that up? All right. Thank you all so much for bringing that. And we will, we'll just continue to have that discussion. So that's the end of our formal agenda items. Does anyone have any miscellaneous matters for consideration?
I do. Sorry.
Okay. It's okay.
Relatively quickly. So we have the water tour. We talked about the water tour coming up. We've also had an interest expressed to Councilwoman Hancock reached out. She wouldn't mind going down to the Arkansas Basin to look at what we've got going on down there. I didn't know if the committee might have an interest. We could do that for a one-day trip. There's a little bit of driving on both the front and back end, but we could, if you were interested, potentially take like a September meeting and turn it into a field trip, and we can talk any business we need to, like in a van on the way down. We could show that big Arkansas farm purchase that we have operating now with our partner down there, if you guys are interested.
I would be interested.
So that would be the September 17th.
Well, and we can adjust the date, but it
okay.
would probably be sometime. Yeah, it would probably be sometime mid to late September or early October, just because of the weather and everything down there. It can get kind of warm in the summer.
I would like it. The 17th is a kind of an issue, but
Yeah, no problem. We could have Casey, if you guys are interested, we could have Casey help shoot some options out, or if you have dates that work better than other dates, you could even shoot some dates into myself or Casey and we could pull it together. There's nothing scheduled, so there's flexibility out in advance. And then the thought, if we take water policy, would be probably to open it up to other council members. That one, the water tour, we only allow one person per household, but you guys could even bring somebody else in your household or a friend if you wanted to on that one. Being a one-day tour would have a little more flexibility. So.
Sounds good. Yeah, keep us posted.
Shoot some dates, or do you guys want to shoot some dates to us that might look
18th, 19th.
18th,
I can
19th?
just tell you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Okay. And then our next meeting, I guess that would be So are we doing still an August meeting before the water tour?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we would like to if you're able.
We can even do an abbreviated one and just bring the Ruben piece if you want.
And that would be the 13th? Is
The
that correct?
20th.
Oh, the 20th. I
Yeah.
will be unavailable due to my surgery, which is happening on the 14th. But if you all want to proceed, and Councilmember Bergan, you could just chair.
I could also move it up a week, Councilmember Coombs, if you, that would be easier for you. You could just move it up a week.
It's going to be a little weird because of some stuff that's happened with my work schedule for that week before the surgery. So I think it's better probably just to keep it as is, and you all can just go ahead and meet without me for that particular one.
Okay, I'm good on that.
That one. Okay. It is the
All right.
presentation, but we're not doing anything crazy this year.
Oh, nice.
Mostly what we've forecast, so.
Stop the craziness.
I'll make sure I review in case the rates conversation gets juicy, but I think you can still go ahead and do that one without me.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all. I think that's everything for our meeting. So we'll go ahead and adjourn and have a great day and rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks over there.
Bye.
Screens over there. Thank you.
Yeah.